What's up guys, my name is Ace, and it turns out there's actually a few hidden changes that came with the update from last week that weren't mentioned in the patch notes. And then on top of this, I'm finally going to be covering the changes to the Stormender launcher that did take place with Season 1 Reloaded, because the patch notes did state some changes were made to that, but it turned out it also broke it in other ways, and I'm not too sure if this was intentional or not, but in either case, I'm going to be sharing how the Stormender works now after this update. And without further ado, let's dive right into it, and the first thing I want to point out here is many people are claiming that there have been some stealth changes to guns, especially with damage values and number of shots to kill. But it turns out most of this is due to the fact that people are trusting firing range dummies. And for those that weren't aware, before the Season 1 Reloaded update, the firing range dummies had 100 HP, whereas in core game modes in Modern Warfare 3, we have 150 HP. So the firing range has never been a good place to be doing testing for number of shots to kill or anything like that. Until the Season 1 Reloaded update. They did actually fix these dummies behind the scenes. I don't believe they mentioned it anywhere in the patch notes, but these dummies now have 150 HP just like regular players. So if you've been noticing a gun that you tested out in the firing range before the update now requires more shots to kill after the update, that should explain it for you. The firing range dummies now have the same amount of health as an actual player. But I do want to tag on just a little disclaimer here. I still wouldn't trust the firing range dummies 100%. And this is primarily when we're looking at body multipliers. We knew this back in Modern Warfare 2, and it still holds true to this day. While the firing range dummies may be a good indication to get a general feel for a gun, and after this update they at least have the accurate amount of total health, those firing range dummies aren't necessarily a 100% perfect stand-in for an actual character in the game. And if you want to get absolute perfect values, you have to do that testing against an actual character model in a custom game. So there we go, that's the first part that I think is really important to bring up here, because I'm sure if I didn't, there'd be a lot of people saying, hey, this gun changed as well, when in reality it didn't, it was just the dummies that changed. Additionally, I was noticing some changes with how the advanced stats are displayed, particularly with burst weapons. The rate of fire values will show up very different after the Reloaded update compared to before the Season 1 Reloaded update. However, I did double check and do the testing on these. The actual rate of fire of the burst guns didn't change at all in the game. It's just how they display the rate of fire values. And I'll be honest, I still don't like how they're displaying these values. The proper method to display the rate of fire for a burst gun is rate of fire within the burst, as well as the burst delay as a separate value. And they're still not doing that. I believe they're just combining the values and kind of doing an overall average of how many rounds per minute you can fire. And that doesn't really give you much of an indication at all as to how that burst gun is going to perform in game. Additionally, something I was quite surprised to see, I noticed for essentially every gun in the game, every gun that I checked at least, and I checked a lot of them, the advanced stats seem to have changed for our recoil values. And in some cases, these were significant changes. The numbers changed very drastically. However, I did a bunch of spot checks on this, checked a bunch of the guns, especially the ones that saw the biggest changes pre-patch versus post-patch in these advanced stats. And I didn't see any measurable change whatsoever to the actual recoil. So again, I think this is just a case of them changing how they're calculating or displaying these recoil values, but the recoil itself is exactly the same pre-patch versus post-patch. At least for every one of the guns that I spot checked. And again, like I said, I was focusing on the ones that saw the biggest changes to their numbers in the advanced stats. So if those changes actually took place, it should be very obvious, because in some cases, those values were like cut in half or doubled practically. And yet the recoil pattern looks exactly the same before and after. And with that, we can now move into the big stealth change that actually took place with this update, and this is with the WSP-9 SMG. With this, they actually reworked the damage values a little bit, and this was an overall nerf at longer ranges to the WSP-9. So you can see when you look at the pre-patch versus post-patch values, our previous minimum damage range has now replaced the values in our third damage range from pre-patch. And then after that, they added a new minimum damage, which is noticeably lower than the previous minimum damage. And that might sound a little bit confusing, and just looking at the numbers, that might not be super clear. So let's have a look at the actual range chart itself for core game modes. And as you can see here, what this means is up close and personal, the WSP-9 is going to perform exactly how it did pre-patch. However, beyond 38 meters, previously it was a guaranteed 5-shot kill anywhere in the body. Now it's going to be a 6-shot kill within that range. So definitely a noticeable change there. However, in saying that, in core game modes, you probably shouldn't be using an SMG beyond 38 meters too often anyway. So for the most part, if you're treating this SMG like an SMG, you probably won't really notice anything at all with the WSP-9 in core game modes. However, this is much more noticeable in hardcore game modes. And the reason for this is pre-patch, the WSP-9 was the only SMG in the entire game, even including Modern Warfare 2 SMGs, it was the only one that never dropped off to a 2-shot kill. Even at extremely long ranges to the toe, it would still be a 1-shot kill pre-patch. Whereas post-patch, we can't get a 1-shot kill to the body beyond 38 meters. It does still have an infinite 1-shot kill potential to the head though, so keep that in mind. A headshot will always be a 1-shot kill with this, but body shots will no longer apply. And I would say in hardcore game modes, if you were using this gun, pre-patch, you could just snipe people with it across the map, no problem. Post-patch, this is going to be very noticeably weaker when you're challenging those long-range engagements. And I would say this is most likely why they made this adjustment to the WSP-9, was to target hardcore specifically. So there we go, that was the one big weapon balancing change that just wasn't mentioned in the patch notes at all, and I think it's important to know that this happened. Now let's finally get into the Stormender and exactly what they changed with this and what broke with this. And we're going to start it off with what they actually mentioned in the patch notes. The Stormender launcher will now destroy a drill charge, which I confirmed this is the case. It will destroy a drill charge from either side of the wall. It does work through walls, so you can just shoot the wall where the drill charge is about to come through, and it will still counter that. Additionally, you can now use the Stormender to take out inflatable decoys. It does take 3 shots to take this out, but you can now at least hit them, whereas pre-patched, it wouldn't do anything to them. It will also counter these smoke airdrop drones now. However, it takes 2 shots to take one of these out. And realistically, with how fast these come into the map, you're probably not going to be taking out any of these drones before they drop the smoke. And therefore, this is just not an effective counter. I just wanted to point out you can at least hit these now. But most importantly, they now made it so you can target swarm drones with the Stormender launcher. And this does now work. You have to pick out the actual drones. Many of the drones that you see in the air, the really high-flying ones, that's just an animation. Those aren't actual drones that exist. So it can sometimes be a little bit tricky to pick out the real drones that you can shoot. But if you manage to do that, it's also worth noting you get 125 score toward your streak for every one of these drones that you destroy. And there's a bunch that you can potentially destroy with this. So if you're running cold-blooded and staying away from teammates so none of these drones will land near you and kill you, you can actually use the Stormender against this to rack up streaks of your own pretty quickly. And that's it as far as what was stated in the patch notes, so it appeared to be just a straight up buff to the Stormender. However, this also came with some apparent bugs, or maybe this was intentional and they just failed to mention it in the patch notes. The first thing I want to point out is shortly after the Reloaded update, they actually broke the Stormender entirely, and based on my testing at the time, they unintentionally capped the range on the Stormender to 10 meters. Like, you couldn't hit anything beyond 10 meters. Even enemy players, it wouldn't register a hit unless you were within 10 meters. It looks like that was taken care of quite quickly, like within a day or two, because when I went back to record that, it turns out it was working just fine beyond 10 meters now. So that part has been fixed. However, there are a few other changes that took place with this that are worth mentioning. And the big thing here is there are several streaks that you were capable of hitting and destroying or disabling with the Stormender that you are no longer capable of hitting. And these are, unfortunately, the cruise missile. I thought it was really cool and unique that you could use a Stormender to destroy a cruise missile, because you had to get that timing just right. You had to have that Stormender on your class, and you had to swap to it very quickly after seeing a notification that it was called in. So it's not like it was a really easy thing to do, and it's not like it would happen all the time. But unfortunately, you can no longer take out cruise missiles. On top of that, helicopters. This includes both the Overwatch Helo as well as the Chopper Gunner. You can no longer hit these with the Stormender launcher. And it's not like the Stormender was great at destroying these, but with the Overwatch Helo, for instance, you could disable it from firing for 5 seconds. Every time you shot it, it would no longer be able to target anybody for 5 full seconds. And then after that 5 seconds, it was back to normal, but you could hit it again after that if you wanted to. That no longer works, and the same thing applies to the VTOL. It used to be able to disable the VTOL for 5 seconds. Now you can't even hit a VTOL. And then finally, the Wheelson. You can no longer disrupt the Wheelson in any way. Previously, you could stop the Wheelson from moving. Now you can't even hit it at all. I did test all of the other streaks that I tested pre-patch though, and those are all still working fine. So you can still hit gunships, for instance. You can hit sentry turrets and guardians, UAVs, counter UAVs. Those all still work exactly the same as they did pre-patch. And there we go. That's finally going to wrap it up for today's video on just a bunch of key changes that I feel were worth mentioning. Keep in mind, it's definitely possible that other stealth changes went through. Anytime there's one stealth change, it always raises the question, what else potentially changed behind the scenes? And unfortunately, I can't test every single stat for every single gun every time there's an update, so I'm not aware of any at this point, but it is possible there were other stealth changes. And if you've noticed something that you think definitely changed with the update, please let me know in the comments down below. I'd be happy to do the testing on that to confirm whether or not that changed pre-patch versus post-patch, as long as I have pre-patch data for that. And with that, this is where I want to hear from you guys in those comments down below. First up, what do you guys think about this hidden change to the WSP-9? Do you think this was an okay change, or do you think it was unnecessary? And also, what are your thoughts on the Stormender launcher and how it was buffed, but then it was also nerfed in other areas? Do you think this was an intentional change or not? If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.